The car crash should have killed him. 10-year-old Tony Stark hung upside down in the back seat, his seatbelt the only thing preventing him from falling onto the shattered roof of his father's Bentley. Blood dripped from a cut on his forehead. His blood, mixing with his parents' blood, creating a pool that reflected the winter stars through the cracked windshield. "Mom?" Tony's voice was small, scared, nothing like the cocky genius child who'd corrected MIT professors just last week. "Dad?" No answer. There would never be an answer again. Howard Stark sat motionless in the driver's seat, his neck bent at an angle that 10-year-old Tony's genius mind recognized as fatal, even as his child's heart refused to accept it. Maria Stark lay against the passenger door, eyes open but unseeing, one hand still reaching toward the back seat, as if she'd tried to protect her son in those final seconds before impact. "Mom, please," Tony whispered, tears mixing with blood on his face. "Dad, wake up. Please wake up." The December wind howled through broken windows, carrying snow that settled on the dead and dying alike. The Bentley had gone off a mountain road. Hydra's winter soldier had ensured the brakes failed at precisely the right curve and now rested against a tree trunk 50 feet down the embankment, invisible from the road above. Tony tried to move, but pain shot through his left arm. Broken, his genius mind cataloged automatically, even as terror consumed his thoughts. He was trapped. His parents were dead, and nobody knew where they were. "Help!" Tony screamed into the darkness. "Someone help, please!" But they were on a private road through restricted forest. No one would hear. No one would come. Tony was going to die alone in the snow with his parents' corpses. Then he heard it. The sound of engines. Not car engines. Something else. Something that shrieked through the air with a pitch that suggested advanced propulsion systems his father would have killed too. Study. A figure descended through the darkness on pillars of fire, landing beside the wreckage with a thump that shook the Bentley's frame. Through the broken window, Tony saw armor, not like his father's prototype designs, but something sleeker, more elegant, painted in silver and blue, with a helmet shaped like a T-visor that somehow managed to seem both menacing and protective. The armored figure knelt beside the driver's side, checked Howard's pulse with professional efficiency, then moved to Maria. After a moment, the helmet turned toward Tony, and despite the expressionless visor, the child genius somehow sensed compassion in that blank face. "The boy lives," a male voice said, filtered through the helmet's vocoder into something flat and emotionless. "Parents deceased. Extraction required." The figure, Tony's shocked mind couldn't process what he was seeing. This impossible armored warrior who'd appeared like a guardian angel in the winter darkness, moved to the back door and simply tore it off its hinges with strength that shouldn't be possible for someone that size. "Don't move," the voice commanded as hands encased in armored gloves reached for Tony's seatbelt. Left arm fractured, possible internal injuries, mild concussion. "Stay still while I extract you." "My parents," Tony managed through tears and shock. "You have to save my parents. Please. My dad, he's Howard Stark. He can pay you anything. They're gone, child." The voice wasn't cruel, just factual. "I'm sorry, but you live, and the living require protection." The seatbelt was cut with a vibro blade that Tony's genius mind distantly registered as technology decades beyond anything his father had developed. Strong but careful hands lifted him from the wreckage, cradling him against armored chest as if he weighed nothing. "Who are you?" Tony asked as they lifted into the air on jetpack thrust that painted the snowy forest with fire. "Someone who knows what it's like to watch your parents die," the armored figure replied. "Someone who was saved by a warrior when he should have died. Someone who understands that foundlings deserve protection." Tony, going into shock from cold and trauma and grief, processed those words with the portion of his mind that never stopped analyzing, never stopped computing, never stopped being genius, even when being child. Foundlings deserve protection. "Are you a superhero?" Tony asked, consciousness fading as warmth from the jetpack and shock from the crash dragged him toward darkness. "No," the voice replied. "I'm Mandalorian. This is the way." Tony Stark passed out in the arms of Din Djarin, not knowing that his entire life had just changed forever. Stark Industries, medical facility. 3 days later, Tony woke to white ceiling tiles, antiseptic smell, and the steady beep of monitoring equipment. His left arm was in a cast. His ribs were wrapped. His head felt like someone had used it as a hammer test subject, but he was alive. "Welcome back, young master," a familiar voice said. Edwin Jarvis, the Stark family butler, the closest thing to a parent Tony had besides Howard and Maria, sat beside the bed, his usually composed face showing the strain of 3 days' vigil. "You gave us quite a scare." "Mom and Dad?" Tony asked, even though he already knew. Genius didn't make grief easier. "I'm so sorry, Tony." Jarvis's voice cracked slightly. "They're gone, but you survived. That's what they would have wanted." "The man in armor," Tony said, memory flooding back. "The one who saved me. Where is he?" "He brought you here, told the emergency staff where to find the crash site, then left before anyone could question him." Jarvis paused. "Security footage shows someone in advanced armor we've never seen before. Propulsion systems beyond our current technology. Mr. Stain has been trying to identify him for 3 days without success." Obadiah Stain, his father's business partner, the man who would temporarily run Stark Industries until Tony came of age. The man whose false sympathy Tony's genius mind could already detect through his concussion. "I want to find him," Tony declared. "The man who saved me. I need to—" "You need to rest," Jarvis interrupted gently. "And then, I'm afraid, there are legal matters. Your parents' funeral, the will, your future. Mr. Stain has proposed that you attend boarding school while he manages—" "No." The voice came from the doorway, and both Tony and Jarvis turned to see the armored figure standing there, somehow having bypassed Stark Industries security to enter a private medical facility undetected. "The boy stays with me," the Mandalorian declared. "I claimed him as foundling. This is the way." "Now see here." Jarvis stood, his British propriety overcoming his shock at the intruder. "You may have saved young Master Tony's life, but you cannot simply claim custody of—" "The boy has no living parents," Din interrupted, his filtered voice carrying absolute certainty. "No siblings, no close family. His father's business partner seeks to control him for profit. The staff," he nodded respectfully to Jarvis, "care for him, but cannot provide what he needs. He requires a warrior's training, structure, discipline, protection. I can provide all three." "I'm 10, Tony pointed out, his genius mind already analyzing the situation. "I inherit Stark Industries when I'm 21. I have to stay in the country for legal reasons. And I'm pretty sure being claimed by armored stranger isn't legally binding custody." The helmet turned toward him, and despite the blank visor, Tony felt assessed by someone who saw more than a traumatized child. "You're smart," Din observed. Good. Intelligence is a weapon more powerful than any armor. You're correct. Legal matters must be addressed. But until you come of age, someone must train you, protect you, ensure you become someone worthy of your inheritance rather than someone destroyed by it. And you're qualified because? Tony challenged, his natural arrogance emerging even through grief and shock. Because I was you, Din replied quietly. A child who watched his parents die. A foundling taken in by warriors who taught me how to transform trauma into purpose. You have 11 years before you inherit your father's company. Let me teach you how to be someone worthy of that responsibility. Absolutely not, Jarvis declared. Tony will stay here, attend proper schools, receive proper upbringing. And become what? Din challenged. Another billionaire playboy who wastes his genius on ego. Another weapons manufacturer who profits from suffering. Another child crushed by expectations he can never meet because no one taught him discipline? How dare you? He's right, Tony interrupted, surprising everyone, including himself. His genius mind had been processing at light speed, analyzing options, calculating probabilities. Jarvis, you're great, but you can't protect me. Not really. Stain wants to control me. I can already see it. Boarding school will be full of people trying to use me for connections. But him. Tony looked at the Mandalorian. He doesn't want anything from me. He just wants to make sure I don't waste what he saved. Tony, you can't be serious, Jarvis protested. You don't know anything about this man. He could be dangerous, could be using you for what? Tony challenged. I don't have access to my inheritance. I don't have power or influence. I'm just a traumatized 10-year-old genius. What could he possibly gain by using me? Purpose, Din answered honestly. I lost someone I was protecting. A child I'd sworn to train. He was taken from me, returned to his own kind, and I was left without purpose. You need a guardian. I need someone to protect, to train, to ensure grows up right. We can help each other. Jarvis looked between the Mandalorian and Tony, recognizing that the boy, always too smart for his own good, had already made up his mind. If I allow this, Jarvis said carefully, there will be conditions, legal oversight, regular check-ins, education requirements, and the moment I suspect any harm, agreed, Din replied. I'm not kidnapping the boy. I'm offering guardianship with full transparency. He'll stay in the country. He'll receive proper education. And when he turns 21 and inherits Stark Industries, he'll be prepared to lead it rather than destroy it. What do you get out of this? Jarvis asked suspiciously. What's your motivation? Din was silent for a long moment, then, redemption. The chance to do for one foundling what I couldn't do for another. The opportunity to ensure that one child who watched his parents die doesn't become consumed by that trauma. This is the way. What does that mean? Tony asked. You keep saying that. This is the way. The way to what? The way of the Mandalorian, Din replied. A creed, a code, a set of principles that turn trauma into purpose, violence into protection, isolation into clan. For 11 years, I'll teach you that way. And when you inherit your father's empire, you'll decide whether to follow it or forge your own path. But either way, you'll do it with discipline, skill, and honor. Tony looked at Jarvis, then at the Mandalorian, his 10-year-old genius mind calculating his future across multiple probability branches. Boarding school, with Stain controlling his life from the shadows. Living with Jarvis, kind but unprepared for raising a genius. or training with a warrior who promised structure, protection, and purpose. Okay, Tony decided. Teach me. But I have conditions too. Name them, Din replied. First, I keep learning. Real education, not just fighting. I'm going to be a better inventor than my dad, and that requires actual schooling. Agreed. Mandalorian training includes knowledge as much as combat. Second, I get to ask questions. About you, about your armor, about where you came from. No, mysterious mentor crap where you refuse to explain anything. Within reason, agreed. Some secrets must be kept, but I'll be honest when I can be. Third, when I turn 21, I make my own choices. You train me, but you don't own me. A foundling is never owned, Din replied. A foundling is raised to be independent, to make their own choices, to walk their own path. That's the entire point. Agreed. Tony extended his non-broken arm. Then we have a deal. Din clasped the boy's hand with armored gauntlet, the gesture sealing a bond that would reshape two lives. Welcome to the clan, Tony Stark, Din said. Your training begins when you've healed, and it will be hard, harder than anything you've experienced. But if you commit, if you follow the way, you'll become more than just a genius. You'll become a warrior. This is the way, Tony repeated, testing the phrase. This is the way, Din confirmed. And in that moment, Tony Stark, who would have become arrogant playboy weapons, manufacturer in another timeline, began the journey to becoming something very different. Iron Mandalorian, the genius warrior who would one day wear armor not as ego, but as identity. Stark residence, guest house. 6 months later. The training had been exactly as hard as Din promised. Harder even. Tony's body was still recovering from the crash. Broken arm healed, ribs mended. But his 10-year-old frame wasn't designed for Mandalorian combat training. Yet Din had been relentless, adjusting techniques for Tony's age and injury, while never compromising the core principles. Again, Din commanded, watching Tony attempt a combat role that ended with the boy sprawled on the training mat. You're thinking too much. Combat is instinct, not calculation. I'm a genius, Tony protested, climbing to his feet with determination that hadn't existed before Din arrived. Calculation is what I do. And it will get you killed, Din replied. Genius is a weapon, but in combat, hesitation is death. You must train your body to react before your mind processes. Again. Tony rolled, this time faster, his body remembering the motion even as his mind tried to optimize it. He came up in defensive stance, not perfect, but better. Improving, Din acknowledged, which was the closest he came to praise. But your footwork is still mechanical. You're placing your feet where you think they should go, rather than where balance dictates. Feel the motion. Don't calculate it. How am I supposed to feel physics? Tony challenged, but there was less frustration in his voice than when they'd started. He was learning that questioning Din led to explanations, and explanations led to understanding. Physics is constant, Din replied, demonstrating a combat stance that looked effortless. Your body knows physics even when your mind is occupied. Trust your training. The mind is for strategy, before and after combat. During combat, you trust your body. Tony attempted the stance, his younger, body awkward, but gradually finding the balance Din demonstrated. Like this? Better. Din circled him, assessing. Your center of gravity is still too high. Lower. Think of yourself as a tree. Roots deep. Branches flexible. A strong wind doesn't knock down a tree. It bends. Returns to center. That's surprisingly philosophical for a warrior, Tony observed, lowering his stance. Warriors who aren't philosophical end up dead, Din replied. Combat is about more than hitting hard. It's about understanding why you fight, how you fight, and what you're willing to die for. Mandalorians survive because we think as much as we train. Is that why you wear armor? Tony asked, not for the first time. He'd been fascinated by Din's Beskar armor since the rescue, his genius mind analyzing every visible component. Protection, sure, but you could achieve similar protection with lighter materials. The armor is symbolic, isn't it? Din paused. He always paused when Tony's questions touched on Mandalorian philosophy. The armor is our identity. It announces to the world who we are and what we stand for. When someone sees Mandalorian armor, they know we're warriors, protectors, beings who follow a code that matters more than our individual lives. The way, Tony said, the phrase becoming more familiar. The way, Din confirmed, which you're not ready to fully embrace yet. You're still a child, still learning. But one day, when you've proven yourself, you'll take your oath and forge your armor. And on that day, you'll understand what it means to be Mandalorian. Tony's eyes lit up with genius-level excitement. You'll teach me to build armor? Real Mandalorian armor? When you're ready, Din replied. Building armor is not just engineering, though you'll need that skill. It's a spiritual practice. Every plate, every joint, every system represents something about who you are. Your armor will be unique to you, reflecting your strengths, compensating for your weaknesses, announcing your identity to everyone who sees it. I'm going to build the best armor ever, Tony declared, with the confidence of genius who'd never failed at engineering. Better than yours. No offense. None taken, Din replied, and though his helmet hid his expression, Tony had learned to read posture well enough to sense amusement. Ambition is good. Overconfidence gets you killed. The line between them is preparation. Come, we've done enough physical training today. Time for weapons instruction. Tony followed Din to the workshop, technically still part of Stark's guest house, but Tony and Din had converted it into a combined training facility and engineering laboratory. On the workbench lay components that shouldn't exist, technology from Din's universe, pieces of Mandalorian equipment that Tony had been studying for months. Beskar, Tony said reverently, touching the small sample Din had allowed him to examine. The strongest metal I've ever analyzed. Its molecular structure is insane. The atoms are bonded in ways that shouldn't be possible according to Earth physics. And this, he gestured to a damaged vambrace, your flamethrower. The fuel compression ratio is beyond anything we can manufacture. How does it not explode? Mandalorian engineering, Din replied, refined over thousands of years. But you're right to study it. Understanding existing technology is the foundation for creating new technology. Can you recreate it using Earth materials? Tony's genius mind immediately began racing through possibilities. Not exactly. Beskar doesn't exist here. But if I understand the principles, the molecular bonding, the energy distribution, the structural integrity, I might be able to create Earth alloys that approximate its properties. Won't be as good, but it'll be better than anything that currently exists. Good, Din approved. Because when you build your armor, you'll need materials that can survive combat. Earth has enemies, Tony. I've been monitoring your news, your conflicts. Gods have visited this planet. Aliens will come. Beings with power beyond conventional weapons. Your armor must protect you from all of them. Gods? Tony asked. You mean like Thor? The Norse mythology stuff? I mean exactly that, Din confirmed. I come from a universe where impossible things are common. Your universe has the same potential. I've felt it. The Force, what some here might call cosmic energy, flows through this reality just as it does through mine. Beings of immense power exist, and when they arrive, Earth's current technology won't be sufficient to face them. But Mandalorian armor would be? Tony challenged. Mandalorian armor combined with your genius? Yes. Din gestured to the workbench. Show me what you've designed. Tony pulled up holographic displays, technology he'd built by combining his father's arc reactor prototypes with understanding gleaned from studying Din's equipment. The projection showed armor, schematics that made Din pause in genuine surprise. This is impressive, Din admitted. You've adapted Mandalorian design principles while incorporating Earth technology I don't fully understand. What's this? He pointed to a glowing component in the armor's chest. Arc reactor, Tony explained proudly. My dad was developing sustainable energy technology before he died. I've been improving his designs. This reactor generates enough power to run the entire armor's systems indefinitely. Propulsion, weapons, shields, everything. No fuel limitations, no ammunition concerns, just pure energy. And if the reactor is damaged? Din asked, immediately identifying the tactical weakness. Then the armor dies, and probably I die too, Tony admitted. It's a vulnerability, but it's also the armor's greatest strength. With this much power, I can incorporate systems that normal armor can't support. Energy shields instead of just passive defense. Repulsor technology for flight and weapons. Computer systems for tactical analysis. I can build armor that thinks as fast as I do. Din studied the designs with warrior's eye that appreciated both the brilliance and the risks. This is good work, Tony. Better than I expected from someone your age. But it's not ready. The reactor is too large. You'd need to reduce its size by at least 60% to make the armor mobile. The power distribution is inefficient. Half the energy would be wasted as heat. And the weapons systems. He pointed to crude energy weapon designs. These would drain the reactor in minutes. I know, Tony said, frustration creeping into his voice. I'm 10. I'm working with limited resources and incomplete understanding of both Mandalorian tech and my dad's arc reactor designs. But I'm learning. And when I'm older, when I have access to Stark Industries' resources, when I've had more training, I'll build this, and it'll work. I believe you, Din replied, and the simple confidence in those words meant more to Tony than any elaborate praise. But remember, armor isn't just about technology. It's about the warrior who wears it. The greatest armor in existence is useless if worn by someone who doesn't understand what they're fighting for. That's why we train. Not just your body and mind, but your spirit, your sense of purpose, your understanding of the way. This is the way, Tony repeated, the phrase now reflexive. This is the way, Din confirmed. Now come. Jarvis has prepared dinner, and you need to eat if you want to grow strong enough to wear this armor you're designing. As they left the workshop, Tony looked back at the holographic displays showing armor that wouldn't exist for another 15 years. Armor that would combine Mandalorian principles with Stark genius, creating something unique to the warrior Tony was becoming. He didn't know yet that this armor would one day be called Iron Man. Didn't know that it would save the world multiple times. Didn't know that the Mandalorian code Din was teaching him would reshape not just his life, but the entire concept of what heroes could be. He only knew that for the first time since his parents died, he had purpose, had direction, had someone who believed that trauma could become strength if properly channeled. Tony Stark was becoming Mandalorian, and the universe, both his and Din's, would never be the same. 25-year-old Tony Stark stood in the Stark Industries boardroom, wearing a custom three-piece suit that cost more than most people's cars. But beneath the Armani fabric, his posture carried something the other board members couldn't quite identify. Discipline that seemed at odds with his reputation as the genius playboy heir. "Gentlemen," Tony addressed the board with confidence that Howard Stark would have recognized, but edge that was entirely new. "I'm proposing we permanently discontinue the Jericho missile program and shift those resources to defensive technology research." Obadiah Stane, now Chief Operating Officer, and the man who'd guided Stark Industries through Tony's minority, barely contained his shock. "Tony, the Jericho program represents 60% of our military contracts. You're talking about abandoning our core business model." "I'm talking about evolution," Tony corrected, his genius mind already 3 steps ahead of everyone in the room. "The Jericho is the most lethal weapon system we've ever created. It can eliminate entire battalions with a single strike. And that's exactly why we shouldn't manufacture it." "Since when do you care about lethality?" another board member challenged. "Your father built this company on weapons technology. It's what we do." "My father built weapons because he believed they protected people," Tony replied, his voice carrying conviction that surprised everyone who'd expected the playboy genius to rubber stamp whatever Stane proposed. "But I was raised to understand the difference between protection and destruction, and the Jericho crosses that line." Stane's eyes narrowed slightly, the only indication of his concern at how differently Tony's upbringing had shaped him compared to expectations. "Raised by whom exactly? That mysterious guardian you lived with? The one whose identity remains classified in your personal files?" "By someone who taught me that true strength isn't about having the biggest weapon," Tony replied evenly. "It's about knowing when not to use weapons at all. Someone who taught me that warriors protect the weak. They don't arm the strong." "That's very philosophical," Stane said, with barely concealed condescension. "But this is business. Stark Industries has shareholders, contracts, obligations. We can't just abandon profitable product lines because of moral squeamishness." "It's not squeamishness," Tony corrected. "It's strategy. The Jericho is too effective. Its proliferation guarantees arms races, escalation, and eventually someone will reverse engineer it and use it against us. Better to pivot now toward defensive systems that don't have the same blowback potential." "Such as?" another board member asked skeptically. "Energy shielding," Tony replied, pulling up holographic displays that made the board pause in recognition of technology that shouldn't exist yet. "Portable force field generators that can protect military installations, vehicles, even individual soldiers. If we shift from offensive to defensive technology, we maintain military contracts while actually reducing overall violence. Everyone wants better shields. Fewer people need better swords." "This technology," Stane studied the displays with expert eye, recognizing advancement beyond current capabilities. "Where did you develop this? What R&D team created these prototypes?" "I did," Tony replied simply, "in my private workshop, using principles I've been studying for 15 years. It works, it's scalable, and it positions Stark Industries as the leader in defensive technology for the next generation. The board can approve the pivot, or I can take these designs and start my own company. Your choice. The threat was clear. Tony owned controlling interest in Stark Industries as of his 21st birthday 4 years ago. He'd been deferring to Stain's experience, but that deference had limits. If the board opposed him, he could force the issue, and probably win. This requires more discussion, Stain said carefully, recognizing that pushing too hard would backfire. Let's table the Jericho cancellation and revisit after we've reviewed your defensive technology proposals more thoroughly. Agreed? 2 weeks, Tony replied. Then I'm making the call regardless of board opinion. This is the right move strategically, morally, and financially. I just wanted you all to understand why before I implemented it. As the board dispersed with varying levels of frustration and concern, Stain pulled Tony aside. What happened to you? When you were 10, you were a traumatized kid who needed guidance. I expected you to take over the company and continue your father's legacy. Instead, you show up with moral philosophy and technology that shouldn't exist. Your mysterious guardian, he changed you, made you into something I didn't expect. He made me into someone worthy of this responsibility, Tony replied, meeting Stain's gaze with confidence that had been forged through 15 years of Mandalorian training. Someone who understands that power comes with obligations. Someone who knows the difference between strength and brutality. You expected me to be my father. I'm not. I'm something else. What exactly? Tony smiled slightly, an expression that carried both warmth and warning. I'm Mandalorian. This is the way. He left before Stain could ask what that meant, heading toward the private elevator that would take him to his workshop, the place where genius met discipline, where stark innovation merged with Mandalorian philosophy, the place where he was preparing for a demonstration in Afghanistan that would change everything. Tony's private workshop, Stark Tower, same evening. Jarvis, bring up the Mark III specifications, Tony commanded as he entered his workshop, a space that combined cutting-edge Earth technology with equipment and principles learned from Din Djarin. Specifications displayed, sir, the AI replied. Jarvis, named after Edwin Jarvis, who'd passed away 2 years prior, represented Tony's tribute to the man who'd supported his unconventional upbringing despite his reservations. May I observe that the Mark III represents significant advancement over Mark II? That's the idea, Tony replied, studying the holographic armor display that showed 15 years of development crystallized into functional design. Mark I was childhood dreaming. Mark II was teenage engineering. Mark III is what I am now, ready for real combat. The armor displayed before him incorporated everything he'd learned. Arc reactor technology miniaturized to chest-mounted size. Repulsor technology for flight and weapons. Structural design based on Mandalorian principles, but executed in Earth materials. Heads-up display that would rival Din's helmet systems. The color scheme, sir, Jarvis observed. Silver and blue with red accents. Significant departure from previous gold titanium alloy designs. Mandalorian colors. Tony replied, running his hands over the partially constructed chest plate. Silver for Beskar, blue for reliability, red for honoring a parent. Din's armor was silver and blue. This is my tribute to 15 years of training, while still being distinctly mine. The helmet design also incorporates Mandalorian aesthetics, Jarvis noted. The faceplate resembles a T-visor configuration, though obviously adapted for repulsor systems and holographic displays. Because the helmet matters, Tony said, examining the faceplate that would soon be completed. Din taught me that. The armor isn't just protection, it's identity. When someone sees this armor, I want them to know I'm a warrior, a protector, someone who follows a code. Speaking of codes, sir, Jarvis's tone shifted slightly. Mr. Jarin sent a message while you were in the board meeting. He said, and I quote, "The demonstration in Afghanistan is unnecessary risk. Cancel it and send subordinates." Tony smiled at the holographic display, showing an encrypted message from coordinates that shifted too frequently to track. Din had returned to his own dimension years ago, but maintained contact through technology Tony had designed specifically to bridge realities. "Tell him I appreciate the concern," Tony replied, "but this is something I need to do personally. The defensive shield generators require demonstration to military contractors, and they need to see that I'm not just theoretical genius. I'm someone willing to stand behind my technology." "He won't approve, sir." "He never approves when I take risks," Tony acknowledged. "But he also taught me that warriors lead from the front. Can't ask soldiers to trust technology I'm not willing to demonstrate myself. This is the way, Jarvis." "As you say, sir," the AI replied, with digital equivalent of resignation. "Though I feel obligated to note that your Mandalorian mentor's concern may be warranted. Intelligence reports suggest increased insurgent activity in the region you'll be visiting. Which is why I'm bringing the Mark III as backup," Tony replied, gesturing to the nearly complete armor. "Publicly, I'm Tony Stark, genius billionaire demonstrating new tech. Privately, I'm prepared for combat if things go wrong. Best of both worlds. Or, worst of both, if the armor fails," Jarvis observed. "It won't fail," Tony said with confidence that 15 years of Mandalorian training had earned. "I've tested every system, run every simulation, triple-checked every component. This armor is ready. I'm ready. And if insurgents want to test that readiness, they'll learn why you don't attack Mandalorians." He continued working on the armor, his hands moving with precision that combined genius intellect with warrior discipline. Every weld perfect, every circuit optimized, every system integrated with the same care Din had shown when maintaining his Beskar armor during Tony's childhood. "Jarvis, play the training recordings," Tony commanded. "The ones from when I was 16. I want to remember where I came from." The workshop's displays shifted, showing holographic footage from 9 years prior. Teenage Tony sparring with Din, getting knocked down repeatedly, climbing back up with stubborn determination that refused to accept defeat. Again, Din's voice came through the recording. "You're telegraphing your strikes. Your opponent will see them coming and counter. Be unpredictable." "I'm a genius," Teenage Tony protested from the recording. "Unpredictable isn't in my nature. I calculate optimal strategies and execute them." "And if your calculation is wrong," Din challenged, "if your opponent is faster, stronger, or simply lucky, you need instinct as much as intelligence." Again, present day. Tony watched himself improve across hours of footage, saw the transformation from arrogant teenager who thought genius solved everything to disciplined warrior who understood genius was merely one tool among many. He was right, Tony told Jarvis, though the AI had heard this observation many times. "Everything he taught me, discipline, honor, understanding that armor is identity, it all matters. I'd be dead a dozen times over if he hadn't trained me." "You would likely be very different," Jarvis agreed diplomatically. "Perhaps more similar to your father's trajectory. My father was brilliant, Tony acknowledged, but he lacked discipline. Created weapons without considering consequences. Built an empire without questioning whether empire was right thing to build. Din saved me from that path. Made me into someone who uses genius for protection rather than destruction. Will you tell him that? Jarvis asked. When you return from Afghanistan? He sends messages, but you rarely respond with anything substantive. Because he already knows, Tony replied. Mandalorians don't need words when actions speak clearly. Every choice I make, every decision to use technology for defense rather than offense, every time I refuse to compromise my code for profit, that's my response. That's how I show him the training worked. He sealed the final component on the Mark III's chest plate, the arc reactor glowing with steady blue light that represented 15 years of development crystallized into working prototype. Jarvis, run full diagnostic on Mark III systems. Flight capability, weapons, shields, power management, everything. I want 0 failures when I'm in Afghanistan. Running diagnostics, sir. Estimated completion time, 6 hours. Good. Meanwhile, I need to review the defensive shield demonstration protocol. The military contractors need to see these systems work under combat conditions. Controlled combat, but realistic enough to prove the technology. Sir? Jarvis interrupted carefully. The armor diagnostics are showing anomaly in the arc reactor housing. Minor structural weakness in the casing that could become critical under sustained combat stress. Tony immediately focused on the holographic display showing microscopic fractures in the reactor casing. Flaws so small that conventional engineering would have missed them, but that Mandalorian perfectionism demanded be corrected. Good catch, Tony acknowledged, already pulling up repair protocols. This is why we test. Jarvis, fabricate replacement casing with reinforced molecular bonding. I want triple redundancy on anything protecting the reactor. Fabrication will require 8 hours, sir. This may delay your Afghanistan departure. Then I delay, Tony replied without hesitation. Din taught me. Never deploy with equipment you don't trust absolutely. Better to delay than to die because you rushed. Inform the contractors that demonstration is postponed 24 hours due to final equipment calibration. They won't be pleased, sir. They'll be less pleased if the demonstration fails because I used flawed equipment, Tony countered. We do this right, or we don't do it at all. This is the way. As Jarvis began fabricating the replacement components, Tony returned to studying the armor that would soon become his identity. Not Iron Man yet. That name would come later. But the foundation upon which that legend would be built. He thought about Din, somewhere in another dimension, probably training another foundling, or pursuing bounties that protected innocents from those who would harm them. Thought about 15 years of lessons, discipline, and philosophy that had transformed traumatized 10-year-old into warrior genius hybrid. Thought about the upcoming demonstration in Afghanistan and the nagging instinct learned through Mandalorian combat training that suggested danger approaching faster than intelligence reports indicated. Jarvis, Tony said quietly, increase the Mark III's armor plating by 15%, especially around the arc reactor and critical joints. That will reduce mobility by approximately 8%, sir. I know, but something tells me I'm going to need durability more than speed. Call it instinct. Call it paranoia. Call it Mandalorian training, telling me to prepare for worst-case scenarios. Very well, sir, adjusting specifications. Tony worked through the night, improving, refining, perfecting. Because that's what Mandalorians did. They prepared until preparation became instinct, trained until training became nature, honored their code until the code became identity. And when dawn broke over New York City, the Mark III armor stood complete. A fusion of Stark genius and Mandalorian discipline, ready to prove that the foundling Din Djarin had rescued 15 years ago had become someone worthy of wearing armor. Someone who understood that protection was more than technology. It was philosophy, purpose, and unwavering commitment to defending those who couldn't defend themselves. This was the way. And Tony Stark was ready to show the world what that meant. Afghanistan, Kunar Province. 5 days later. The demonstration had gone perfectly. The defensive shield generators had performed beyond specifications. The military contractors were impressed, and Tony had successfully proven that Stark Industries' new direction was viable, profitable, and superior to conventional weapons systems. Everything had gone according to plan, right up until the convoy was attacked. Tony's Mandalorian training kicked in before his conscious mind processed the danger. He was out of the Humvee and moving toward cover before the first explosion finished echoing through the canyon, his body reacting with instinct that 15 years of combat drills had hardwired into muscle memory. "Stark, get down!" Colonel Rhodes, Rhodey, his best friend and military liaison, shouted, providing covering fire as insurgents poured from concealed positions with weapons that made Tony's genius mind pause even in the middle of combat. Those were Stark Industries weapons, Jericho missiles. Technology that shouldn't be in insurgent hands, being used against the convoy, being used against him. "Jarvis," Tony subvocalized through the comm system hidden in his ear. "Analyze the attack pattern. Where are they getting Stark weapons?" "Unknown, sir," the AI replied through the same channel. "But weapons signatures match recent Stark Industries shipments to authorized military contractors. Suggests supply chain compromise or deliberate diversion." "Stain," Tony muttered, diving behind cover as another explosion rocked the convoy. "He's been selling under the table. That son of a..." Pain. Sudden, absolute, consuming pain that made Tony look down at his chest where shrapnel had punched through his body armor. Armor that was good, but not good enough. Armor that wasn't Mandalorian grade. Armor that had failed at the critical moment. His genius mind cataloged the damage even as shock tried to shut down consciousness. Shrapnel penetrating chest cavity. Fragments lodged near heart. Blood loss critical. Survival time measured in minutes. "Rhodey," Tony managed, his voice weak as soldiers pulled him away from the combat zone. "My workshop. Mark the 3rd armor. Coordinates in my phone. Get it?" Darkness took him before he could finish the sentence. His last conscious thought, a prayer to a mentor in another dimension. "Din, I should have listened. You were right. This was unnecessary risk. But I'm Mandalorian. And Mandalorians don't quit, even when dying." Cave complex. Unknown location. 17 hours later. Tony woke to agony and the sound of machines. His chest felt like it was being crushed and electrified simultaneously. Every breath, a new experience in creative torture. Above him, an IV drip fed something into his arm. Beside him, a car battery connected to... His hand shot to his chest, feeling the crude electromagnet bolted to his sternum, the wires running into his body, the battery keeping shrapnel from reaching his heart. "I wouldn't pull on that," a voice said, in accented English. An older man, Middle Eastern, kind eyes that had seen too much suffering, watched from across the cave. The shrapnel is moving toward your heart. The magnet keeps it at bay. Remove it, and you have perhaps 4 minutes before death. Who are you? Tony asked, his genius mind already analyzing the situation. Captured, critically wounded, being kept alive for reason unknown. Where am I? I am Yinsen, the man replied. A doctor, or I was, before this war consumed everything. You are in a cave controlled by the 10 rings. They captured you, brought you here, and demanded I keep you alive. Which I have done, though you very nearly died during the surgery. Why keep me alive? Tony asked, though his tactical training was already providing answers. They want something. They want you to build them a missile, Yinsen confirmed. The Jericho. They have parts, materials, even your company's weapon specifications. They believe you will build it for them in exchange for your life. Tony laughed, a sound that carried no humor and considerable pain. Then they don't know me very well. You will refuse? Yinsen asked, surprise evident. Most men, when faced with death, will compromise their principles. I'm not most men, Tony replied, his Mandalorian training asserting itself even through pain and fear. I was raised by a warrior who taught me that some things matter more than survival. Honor matters. Protecting the innocent matters. I don't build weapons for terrorists. I'd rather die. Yinsen studied him with eyes that had seen many prisoners, many victims, many men who claimed courage they didn't possess. You mean that? I can see it. But you should know. Refusing means they will torture you, kill you slowly, make an example to ensure future captives cooperate. Let them try, Tony said, his voice carrying conviction that surprised even himself. I've been training for 15 years to be someone who doesn't break under pressure. This is the test, and I'm not failing it. This warrior who raised you, Yinsen asked curiously. He must have been remarkable to inspire such conviction. What did he teach you? He taught me that armor isn't about protection. It's about identity, Tony replied. That weapons should protect the weak, not arm the strong. That true warriors would rather die with honor than live through compromise. He taught me, his voice grew quieter. He taught me, this is the way. The way? Yinsen repeated. The way to what? The way of the Mandalorian, Tony said. The creed I follow. The code that defines who I am. And that code says I don't build weapons for terrorists, not even to save my own life. Yinsen smiled sadly. Then I'm afraid we will both die here. Because when you refuse, they will kill me too, for failing to convince you. I have no warrior training, no code, no armor of identity. I'm just a doctor who couldn't save his village when the 10 rings attacked. I couldn't protect my family, and now I will. Die for a principle I admire, but don't share. Tony looked at the doctor, this man who'd saved his life, who would die because Tony refused to compromise, and felt Mandalorian philosophy clash with reality in ways Din's training hadn't fully prepared him for. What if, Tony said slowly, his genius mind beginning to calculate alternatives, what if I build them something, but not what they expect? What if I use their materials to create something that protects us instead of arming them? What could you possibly build? Yinsen asked skeptically. They have brought missile components, not... They brought materials, Tony interrupted, his mind racing through possibilities. Metals, circuits, power sources, electronics. Everything I need, not to build a missile, but to build armor. Mandalorian armor, adapted for Earth technology. Armor strong enough to break us out of here. That's impossible, Yinsen protested. The materials alone would require. I'm Tony Stark, Tony said with confidence that Mandalorian discipline had forged into certainty rather than arrogance. I'm the genius who improved my father's arc reactor designs. I'm the warrior who's been preparing for combat since I was 10 years old. And I'm the Mandalorian who refuses to die in a cave when I haven't finished building the armor I've been designing for 15 years. He looked at the car battery keeping him alive, at the crude electromagnet in his chest, and his genius mind saw not limitation, but opportunity. Yinsen, Tony said, with growing conviction, how do you feel about helping me build an arc reactor that fits in my chest? Because that's step 1. And step 2 is building armor that will make our captors regret they ever heard the name Tony Stark. You're serious, Yinsen realized, seeing determination that exceeded mere survival instinct. You actually believe you can build armor advanced enough to escape from armed captors in a fortified cave complex. I don't believe, Tony corrected, his Mandalorian training asserting itself through pain and impossibility. I know, because my mentor taught me. When you wear the armor, when you follow the code, when you commit to the way, you become more than you were. You become someone who does impossible things because the alternative is accepting defeat, and Mandalorians never accept defeat. This is the way? Yinsen asked. This is the way, Tony confirmed. And in that cave in Afghanistan, surrounded by enemies and mortality, Tony Stark began building the armor that would define him. Not as his father's son, not as a billionaire genius, but as the Mandalorian foundling who refused to quit even when quitting seemed rational. The Mark I was crude, brutal, nothing like the elegant Mark III waiting in his workshop. But it was Mandalorian in philosophy, if not form, built from necessity, forged in hardship, designed to protect rather than destroy. And when Tony Stark emerged from that cave, wearing armor and fire, the 10 rings would learn what Din Djarin had taught for 15 years. A true Mandalorian's most dangerous weapon isn't technology. It's the absolute refusal to surrender. This is the way. The miniaturized arc reactor glowed in Tony's chest like a star contained in flesh. Its blue light casting shadows across the cave walls as he worked on what the terrorists believed was a Jericho missile, but was actually something far more dangerous to them. They're getting suspicious, Yinsen warned in hushed tones, his eyes on the cave entrance where guards periodically checked on their progress. Raza asked me yesterday why the missile assembly is taking so long. I told him precision weapons require time, but he's not stupid. He knows you're stalling. Not stalling, Tony corrected, his hands moving with precision that combined genius intellect and Mandalorian discipline as he welded together pieces of armor that looked crude but functioned. Building. There's a difference. Stalling implies delay without progress. I'm making excellent progress, just not on what they think. He gestured to the armor, taking shape around them. Mark I, as he designated it in his mind, bore little resemblance to the elegant Mark III waiting in his New York workshop. This was brutal engineering, all function and zero aesthetics, built from stolen missile components and scavenged materials. But beneath the crude exterior, Mandalorian principles guided every design choice. The chest plate is too heavy, Yinsen observed, studying the armor with engineer's eye despite his medical background. You'll barely be able to move, let alone fight. Weight is less important than protection, Tony replied, echoing Din's lessons from 15 years of training. Mandalorian armor prioritizes survivability over mobility. I can't dodge bullets like my mentor could. I don't have his training or experience, so I compensate with armor thick enough to stop anything they can shoot at me. The arc reactor provides enough power to move the weight. That's the advantage of powered armor over traditional Beskar. Beskar? Yinsen asked. Mandalorian metal, Tony explained, his hands never stopping work, even as he talked. Strongest material in my mentor's universe, nearly indestructible. We don't have it here, so I'm using layered steel and titanium in configurations that approximate its protective qualities. Not as good, but good enough. Your mentor taught you armor smithing? Yinsen asked, fascinated despite their dire circumstances. Along with philosophy and combat, what kind of warrior was he? The best kind, Tony replied quietly, his mind drifting to memories of Din Djarin demonstrating armor maintenance with the same care most people reserve for religious rituals. The kind who understood that armor isn't just equipment, it's identity. Every plate, every system, every component tells a story about who you are and what you believe. This armor, he gestured to the Mark I, tells the story of a man who refuses to build weapons for terrorists even when threatened with death, who uses his genius to protect rather than destroy, who honors his training even in impossible circumstances. And what story does the glowing circle in your chest tell? Yinsen asked, gesturing to the arc reactor that had replaced the crude car battery. Tony touched the reactor unconsciously, feeling its steady pulse like a second heartbeat. This tells the story of a man kept alive by his own genius and stubbornness. My father designed the arc reactor as sustainable energy source. I miniaturized it to fit in my chest and power armor he never imagined. In a way, I'm honoring both fathers, the one who gave me genius and the one who taught me how to use it with honor. Two fathers, Yinsen observed. The biological and the adopted. Which one shaped you more? Din, Tony replied without hesitation. Howard Stark gave me intelligence and resources. Din Djarin gave me purpose and discipline. Without the first, I couldn't build this armor. Without the second, I wouldn't have the courage to use it for the right reasons. Both matter. But if I had to choose which man's son, I'm Mandalorian. This is the way. A sound at the cave entrance made both men freeze. Raza entered with armed guards, his expression suspicious as he surveyed their progress. You have been working for 3 weeks, Raza said, his English accented but clear. The Jericho missile should be complete. Yet I see components that don't match specifications. Explain. Tony's Mandalorian training kicked in. When confronted, don't show fear, show confidence. Precision weapons can't be rushed. Your materials are scavenged, not manufactured to specification. I'm having to adapt the design to account for inferior components. Would you rather have a functional weapon that takes time, or a rushed weapon that explodes in your face? Raza studied Tony with eyes that had seen many liars. I think you are building something else, something you believe will help you escape. You are clever, Tony Stark, but not as clever as you think. You have 1 week. Complete the Jericho, or we kill your friend. Here. He gestured to Yinsen, slowly, while you watch, and then we kill you. Understand? Perfectly, Tony replied with calm that came from 15 years of facing things that terrified him while maintaining Mandalorian composure. Raza left, and Yinsen exhaled shakily. 1 week. Tony, the armor isn't ready. You said you needed at least 2 more weeks to complete the propulsion systems, the weapons, Then we accelerate the timeline, Tony interrupted, his mind already racing through modifications. I'll strip non-essential systems, simplify the design, reduce testing protocols. It won't be perfect, but it'll be functional. And if it fails? Yinsen asked. If the armor doesn't work? If the weapons jam? If the propulsion system explodes? Then we die trying to escape instead of dying as slaves to terrorists, Tony replied with Mandalorian certainty. My mentor taught me, there are worse things than death. Living without honor is one of them. Building weapons for people who kill innocents. That's worse than death. I'd rather die fighting than live compromising everything I believe. You really mean that, Yinsen said, with something like awe. Most people claim such conviction. You genuinely possess it. Your warrior mentor, he trained you well. He trained me to be someone worthy of wearing armor, Tony corrected, returning to work with renewed intensity. Now, I have to prove I learned the lessons. Jarvis. He activated the primitive AI he'd coded into a salvaged laptop. Nowhere near as sophisticated as his workshop version, but functional. Run combat simulations. Marked one armor against 12 hostiles armed with automatic weapons in confined space. Calculate success probability. The laptop's screen flickered with analysis. Probability of successful escape, 37%. Primary risk factors, limited mobility, untested weapon systems, unknown enemy reinforcements. 37% is better than 0, Tony observed. And those odds don't account for the one advantage we have that computers can't calculate. I'm Mandalorian. I don't accept defeat just because odds say I should. Din taught me that belief shapes reality as much as physics does. If I believe I can fight my way out of here, that belief becomes tactical advantage. That's not how reality works, Yinsen protested gently. Isn't it? Tony challenged, his hands welding the armor's right gauntlet. How many times have you seen people survive impossible situations because they refuse to accept impossibility? How many battles have been won by armies that wouldn't accept they were supposed to lose? Belief matters, Yinsen. It's not magic, but it's real. The human mind fighting for something it believes in performs beyond its normal limits. Mandalorians have known this for thousands of years. It's why our creed emphasizes honor and purpose, because warriors fighting for something bigger than themselves become more than warriors. They become unstoppable. Yinsen watched Tony work, seeing not arrogant billionaire, but disciplined warrior channeling genius through code that transformed impossible into merely improbable. Tell me about him, Yinsen requested. Your mentor, the Mandalorian who shaped you. What was his name? Din Djarin, Tony replied, the name carrying reverence despite his continued work. Foundling himself, orphaned young, raised by warriors who taught him the creed. He became bounty hunter, protector, guardian of those who couldn't protect themselves. And when he found me, 10 years old, watching my parents die, he saw himself, saw a child who needed what he'd been given: purpose, discipline, and armor to survive a hostile universe. He sounds like good man, Yinsen observed. He's the best man I've ever known, Tony said quietly. Better than my biological father, better than the billionaires and scientists I've met, better than anyone who measured worth by wealth or intelligence. Because Din measured worth by honor, by whether you protected the weak or preyed on them, by whether you kept your word even when breaking it was easier, by whether you wore your armor with pride or shame. And you wear yours with pride? Yinsen asked. I will, Tony promised, looking at the nearly complete Mark I. When I break us out of here wearing armor, built from the weapons they wanted me to create for them, when I use their own materials to defeat them, that'll be pride. That'll be honoring everything Din taught me. That'll be proving that Mandalorian training wasn't wasted on a billionaire genius who could have taken the easy path. He worked through the night, through the next day, through exhaustion and pain and doubt. The arc reactor in his chest pulsed steadily, keeping him alive, powering his determination along with the armor. Yinsen helped where he could, learning quickly, adapting medical precision to engineering challenges. 5 days into their 1-week deadline, Yinsen asked the question Tony had been dreading. When we escape, if we escape, what happens to me? You'll return to your company, your wealth, your life. But I have no life to return to. My family is dead, my village destroyed. What becomes of a doctor with nothing left to protect? Tony paused in his work, recognizing the question beneath the question. What meaning exists after everything meaningful is taken? Din asked me something similar once, Tony said. When I was 16, frustrated by training that seemed pointless, I asked him, what's the point of learning combat I'll never use? Of following a code nobody else follows? Of being Mandalorian in a universe that doesn't understand what that means? You know what he told me? What? Yinsen asked. He said, the point is becoming someone who could use combat, but chooses not to. Someone who follows a code because it's right, not because others enforce it. Someone who is Mandalorian precisely because the universe doesn't understand, because being understood is less important than being worthy. He taught me that meaning isn't found in what you protect. It's found in the act of protecting. Even when you lose everything, even when you fail, even when nobody remembers, if you spent your life protecting others, that life had meaning. So, what would he say to me? Yinsen asked. A doctor who failed to protect his family? Who couldn't save his village? Whose life's work ended in ashes? He'd say your life isn't over yet, Tony replied. You saved me. You're helping me build armor that'll free us both. And when we escape, you'll have choice. Return to medicine, start over somewhere new, or, he paused, an idea forming. Or come work for me. Stark Industries needs doctors who understand what it means to protect people. People who've lost everything, but still choose to help others. You'd fit right in. You're offering me a job? Yinsen asked incredulously. We're imprisoned by terrorists, building armor from scrap, likely to die in the next few days, and you're offering me employment? I'm offering you purpose, Tony corrected. Same thing Din offered me when my parents died. The chance to transform trauma into meaning, to use your skills protecting people who need protection, to join something bigger than yourself. Not a clan in the Mandalorian sense, but close. A team of people who believe in using their abilities to defend others. Interested? Before Yinsen could answer, alarms sounded through the cave complex. Raza's voice echoed through passages. Stark, we know what you're building. We're coming for you now. If you want to live, you'll... Now or never, Tony said, already moving toward the armor. Jarvis, initiate Mark I startup sequence. Yinsen, help me into the armor. We're out of time. It's not fully tested, Yinsen protested, even as he helped Tony into the heavy metal framework. The weapons might not fire. The propulsion might explode. The Mandalorians don't wait for perfect, Tony interrupted. the armor closing around him with mechanical precision that represented 3 weeks of impossible engineering. We deploy with what we have and adapt. Din taught me that. Now help me seal the helmet and get behind me. When I break through that door, stay close and follow my lead. The helmet locked into place, and Tony's HUD flickered to life, primitive compared to what he designed for Mark III, but functional. He could see targeting reticles, power levels, structural integrity monitors, everything he needed to fight. "Jarvis," Tony sub-vocalized through the helmet's internal comms. "Calculate optimal path to exit. Factor in hostiles, structural weaknesses, and the fact that I've never actually worn powered armor in combat before." "Calculating, sir. Recommended path uploaded to your HUD. May I observe that your heart rate indicates significant stress? I'm about to fight my way out of a terrorist stronghold wearing untested armor, powered by a miniature star in my chest," Tony replied. "Stress is appropriate. Now give me weapon status. Flamethrower functional at 60% capacity. Repulsor systems theoretical. First live test will occur in combat. Rocket propulsion untested. Structural integrity sufficient for small arms fire. Questionable against explosives." "Good enough," Tony declared, the Mandalorian code asserting itself. Perfection is impossible. Excellence is mandatory. Deploy the best you have and make it work. The cave door exploded inward, terrorists pouring through with weapons raised, and Tony Stark, genius, billionaire, and Mandalorian foundling, raised his armored gauntlet and spoke words that would one day become his signature. But in this moment were simply truth. "I am Iron Man." The flamethrower activated. Cave exit, 10 rings. Territory, 17 minutes later. Tony crashed through the final barrier in a ball of fire and fury, the Mark I armor smoking but intact, Yinsen close behind him. Both men somehow alive despite odds that had been overwhelmingly against survival. Behind them, the cave complex burned. Terrorists who'd thought Tony Stark would build them weapons learned that Mandalorians build armor, not arms. That genius combined with discipline creates force multiplier beyond simple firepower. That a man fighting for honor is more dangerous than 100 men fighting for profit. "Go!" Tony commanded, his armor's propulsion system activating with thrust that lifted him into the air. Barely controlled, wildly unstable, but functional enough to clear the perimeter. "Yinsen, run for that ridge. I'll provide cover." But even as he said it, Tony's combat-trained mind registered the threat. Sniper position, 300 meters, targeting Yinsen, who was exposed and vulnerable. Time slowed, not literally, but perceptually, the way Din had taught him combat awareness worked. The sniper's finger tightening on trigger. Yinsen running, unaware. Tony in armor, able to intercept, but not fast enough to save both of them. Mandalorian code was clear. Protect the clan. Protect the foundling. Protect those who cannot protect themselves, even at cost to yourself. Tony diverted thrust, threw himself between Yinsen and the sniper's sight line, and felt the impact as rounds that would have killed the doctor struck his armor instead. The Mark I held? Barely. But the sniper was already adjusting aim, targeting Yinsen again. No time to think, only time to act. Tony's repulsor fired. First live test. Completely untested technology might explode or fail, or simply do nothing. And the beam of concentrated arc reactor energy struck the sniper's position with force that vaporized the threat and half the ridge it had occupied. "Holy shit," Tony breathed, staring at his gauntlet. It worked. The repulsors actually worked. Din would be proud. Jarvis, mark that as successful test. Repulsor technology confirmed functional. Noted, sir. Also noting that armor integrity is at 32% and falling. Multiple hull breaches. Power drain accelerating. Propulsion system critically damaged. Recommend immediate evacuation. Working on it, Tony replied, staggering toward Yinsen, who stared at him with expression mixing gratitude and shock. Yinsen, can you run? Because this armor is dying and I need to get us to... The sound of rotors interrupted him. A helicopter crested the ridge, and Tony's combat training prepared him to fight until he recognized the markings. U.S. Air Force. Rhodey's voice came through external speakers. Tony, is that you and that metal monster? What the hell happened? Long story, Tony replied, the armor finally giving up entirely and collapsing to its knees. Servos dying. Power systems failing. The Mark I becoming tomb instead of protection. Short version, terrorists wanted Jericho. I built armor instead, killed them with their own weapons, saved the doctor who saved me. Standard Tuesday. That's not standard anything. Rhodey protested as the helicopter landed and soldiers poured out to help extract Tony from the dead armor. We've been searching for you for 3 weeks. Thought you were dead. Almost was, Tony admitted as they pried the helmet off, revealing his face. Exhausted, bloody, but alive and grinning with manic energy that came from surviving impossible situations. But Mandalorians don't die easy. We're too stubborn. Speaking of which, he gestured to Yinsen. This is Dr. Yinsen. He saved my life. I'm hiring him. Make sure he gets on the helicopter. You're hiring people while being rescued from terrorists? Rhodey asked incredulously. I'm a billionaire genius who just built powered armor in a cave using scraps, Tony replied. I can multitask. Now get me home. I have armor to rebuild properly. This, he gestured to the Mark I, was proof of concept. The production model will be better. Much better. Mandalorian grade better. As the helicopter lifted off, carrying them away from the burning terrorist complex, Tony looked back at the wreckage of the Mark I. Crude, brutal, inelegant, but successful. It had done its job. Protected him and Yinsen. Proven that armor wasn't just technology, but philosophy made manifest. And more importantly, it had proven that 15 years of Mandalorian training hadn't been wasted on a genius who could have taken easier paths. Tony Stark had faced death and chosen honor, had been offered compromise and chosen code, had worn armor into combat and emerged worthy of wearing it. Din would be proud. This was the way. Stark Industries press conference, Malibu, 24 hours after rescue. Tony Stark sat on the floor of the press conference room, eating a cheeseburger, while dozens of reporters shouted questions, and Obadiah Stane tried desperately to manage the chaos. The billionaire genius looked like he'd been through hell, which he had. But beneath the exhaustion and trauma, something fundamental had changed. Mr. Stark, what happened in Afghanistan? Mr. Stark, is it true you were held by the 10 rings? Mr. Stark, how did you escape? Tony finished his cheeseburger with deliberate calm, Mandalorian discipline maintaining composure when chaos surrounded him, then stood and approached the microphone with confidence that made Stane nervous for reasons the COO couldn't quite articulate. I have a statement, Tony said, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet room. No questions until I'm finished. Understood? The reporters nodded, sensing this wasn't the playboy genius they'd covered before. This was someone who'd seen death and returned with purpose. For 15 years, Tony began, I've been preparing to take over Stark Industries, learning the business, understanding the technology, being groomed to continue my father's legacy of weapons manufacturing. And until 3 days ago, I believed that legacy was something to be proud of. Then I was captured by terrorists using Stark Industries weapons. Weapons I designed, weapons my company sold, weapons that ended up in the hands of people who kill innocents. And I realized something my mentor taught me when I was 10 years old. Weapons don't protect people. Weapons kill people. There's a difference. Tony, Stain interrupted carefully, recognizing disaster approaching. Maybe we should discuss this privately before... I'm done discussing privately, Tony interrupted. I'm done compromising. I'm done pretending that selling weapons to the highest bidder makes us heroes. As of this moment, I'm shutting down Stark Industries' weapons manufacturing division. Permanently. No more missiles, no more bombs, no more technology designed to kill. We're transitioning to defensive technology, medical applications, and sustainable energy. That's the legacy I'm choosing. Not my father's legacy. Mine. The press room exploded. Reporters shouted questions. Stain grabbed Tony's arm with grip that bordered on painful. Rhodey, standing in the back, smiled slightly because he'd been waiting for his friend to fully commit to the path that Mandalorian mentor had prepared him for. You can't do this, Stain hissed. The board won't approve. Our military contracts represent... I own controlling interest, Tony replied calmly, pulling his arm free with Mandalorian combat technique that made Stain stumble. The board can disapprove all they want. This is happening. Stark Industries builds protection from now on, not weapons. This is the way. What the hell does that mean? Stain demanded. It means I finally became the man my mentor trained me to be, Tony replied. Someone who uses genius to defend people, not arm their killers. Someone who wears his values as clearly as armor. Someone who refuses to compromise honor for profit. You wanted me to be my father? I'm not. I'm Mandalorian, and it's time this company reflected that. He walked off the stage while reporters shouted and Stain's carefully constructed business empire began crumbling. Rhodey intercepted him in the corridor outside. That was either the bravest thing you've ever done or the stupidest, Rhodey observed. Possibly both. Definitely both, Tony agreed, but it needed to be said. I can't keep making weapons, Rhodey. Not after seeing what they do. Not after watching people die from technology I created. Din taught me better than that. Your mysterious mentor, Rhodey said. You never talk about him, but he shaped you more than Howard Stark ever did. When do I get to meet this legendary Mandalorian? You can't, Tony replied with regret that surprised even himself. He's back in his own dimension, different universe entirely. But he left me with training, philosophy, and understanding that armor is identity. Now I need to build armor worthy of that identity. The Mark I proved it's possible. The Mark III will prove it's practical. Mark III? Rhodey asked. What happened to Mark II? Built it years ago, never deployed it, Tony explained. Consider it prototype. Mark III is the real thing. Full Mandalorian design principles applied to arc reactor technology. When it's complete, it'll be the most advanced armor system Earth has ever seen, and I'm going to use it to clean up the mess Stark Industries created. You're talking about becoming a vigilante, Rhodey observed carefully. Using military-grade technology without oversight or authorization. That's illegal, Tony. could get you arrested or worse. So was escaping from terrorists using armor I built in a cave, Tony countered. Turns out, when you follow a code that prioritizes protecting people over following rules, you end up breaking rules sometimes. Din taught me that. Mandalorians don't serve governments. We serve our creed. And my creed says the weapons I created are out there killing people. That makes it my responsibility to stop them. The government won't see it that way, Rhodey warned. Then the government can try to stop me, Tony replied with Mandalorian stubbornness. But they won't succeed, because I'm not doing this for approval or permission. I'm doing it because it's right. This is the way, Rhodey. Either support me or get out of my way. But don't try to stop me. We've been friends too long for that to end well. Rhodey studied his friend, seeing determination that exceeded normal Stark arrogance, commitment that came from something deeper than ego, and made a decision that would shape both their futures. Fine, Rhodey said. I'll support you, quietly, where I can. But Tony, if you're going to, do this. Do it right. Don't just build armor and punch things. Build a system. Create protocols. Make this sustainable. Your mentor taught you discipline, right? Apply that discipline to vigilante justice. Not vigilante, Tony corrected. Mandalorian. There's a difference. Vigilantes operate outside the law, out of anger or ego. Mandalorians follow a code that exists independent of law, sometimes aligned with it, sometimes not, but always guided by principles that prioritize protection over revenge. I'm not hunting people for fun. I'm fulfilling my responsibility to protect innocents from weapons I created. That's a fine distinction, Rhodey observed. It's the only distinction that matters, Tony replied. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have armor to build. The Mark III has been waiting in my workshop for this moment. Time to finish what I started 15 years ago, when Din first taught me that armor is identity. Stark Tower, Workshop. 1 week later. The Mark III stood complete on its assembly platform, silver and blue with red accents, every line flowing with aesthetic that combined Mandalorian elegance and Stark innovation. Tony circled it with critical eye that 15 years of training had honed to perfection, checking every weld, every circuit, every system. Jarvis, run full diagnostic, Tony commanded. Every system, every backup, every possible failure point. I want 0 surprises when I deploy this. Diagnostic running, sir, the AI replied, far more sophisticated than the primitive version that had helped in Afghanistan. Estimated completion, 2 hours. May I observe that the Mark III represents significant advancement over Mark I? That's the idea, Tony said, studying the armor that represented 15 years of development. Mark I was survival armor, built in crisis, deployed in desperation, crude but functional. Mark III is identity armor, built with resources and time, designed to be worn proudly, elegant and lethal. This is what Mandalorian armor looks like when genius builds it. The color scheme is significant, Jarvis observed. Silver and blue with red accents, not typical Stark colors. Mandalorian colors, Tony confirmed, running his hand over the chest plate where the arc reactor would slot. Silver for Beskar, blue for reliability and honoring Din's armor, red for my father's legacy. This armor represents both sides of who I am, Stark genius and Mandalorian discipline. When people see it, I want them to know I'm not just some billionaire playing hero. I'm a warrior who follows a code. And the helmet design? Jarvis asked. The faceplate incorporates T-visor aesthetics despite being optimized for repulsor systems. Because the helmet matters, Tony replied, lifting the faceplate and examining it with reverence usually reserved for religious artifacts. Din taught me that. The armor isn't just protection, it's announcement. When someone sees Mandalorian helmet, they know immediately, this is a warrior. This is someone who follows the code. This is someone whose identity is inseparable from their armor. I want that same recognition. Want people to see this helmet and know that Iron Man. He paused, testing the name that had emerged from Afghanistan. That Iron Man stands for something. Sir, Jarvis interrupted. Incoming call from an encrypted source. Signal is unusual, routing through dimensional frequencies that shouldn't be accessible from Earth technology. Tony's heart rate spiked. He recognized those frequencies. Put it through. Audio only. Din Djarin's voice, filtered through vocoder, but unmistakable, emerged from the workshop speakers. Tony, I saw what you did. The press conference, shutting down weapons manufacturing, choosing honor over profit. I'm proud. Din, Tony said, emotion threatening to crack his Mandalorian composure. I didn't think I'd hear from you again. How are you even contacting me? The technology you designed to bridge our dimensions, Din replied. I've been monitoring your universe's news broadcasts, watching your progress, and I wanted you to know. You became the warrior I hoped you'd become. Better than I expected. You honored the training. I followed the way, Tony replied. Like you taught me. Even when it was hard. Even when profit was easier. Even when everyone said I was wrong, I chose honor. Because that's what Mandalorians do. That's what you do, Din corrected. Don't mistake my training for your character. I taught you skills and philosophy. You chose to apply them with integrity. That choice was yours, Tony. Be proud of it. I built the armor, Tony said, gesturing to the Mark III, even though Din couldn't see it. The one I started designing when I was 16. It's complete. Mandalorian design principles applied to Earth technology, powered by arc reactor that would make my father jealous. It's ready, Din. I'm ready. I know, Din replied. I sensed it even across dimensional boundaries. You've become someone worthy of wearing armor. But remember, the armor doesn't make you Mandalorian. Your choices do. The armor just announces those choices to the world. Wear it with honor. I will, Tony promised. This is the way. This is the way, Din confirmed. And Tony, one more thing. You're not alone. Even when you feel isolated by the code, even when following honor seems to separate you from others, you're not alone. Mandalorians across infinite realities follow the same creed. We're your clan, even when we're not physically present. Remember that. I will, Tony said, his voice thick with emotion he'd learned to control but never eliminate. Thank you, Din, for everything, for saving me, for training me, for making me into someone who could wear this armor and mean it. You're welcome, foundling, Din replied. Now go. Show your universe what Mandalorian justice looks like. And if you ever need help, truly need it, I'll find a way to return. The bond between mentor and foundling transcends dimensional boundaries. This is the way. This is the way, Tony replied. But Din had already disconnected, leaving Tony alone in his workshop with armor that represented 15 years of preparation finally coming to fruition. Jarvis, Tony said quietly, mark this moment. Today, Tony Stark fully commits to being Iron Man. Today, Mandalorian philosophy meets Earth reality. Today, we start cleaning up the mess Stark Industries created. Send out notice to Rhodey and Pepper. I'm deploying tonight. Target, Gulmira, Afghanistan. 10 rings present still operating with Stark weapons. Time to fulfill my obligation. Sir, Jarvis observed carefully, Ms. Potts has expressed concern about your mental state post-Afghanistan. She believes you're experiencing trauma-driven decision-making rather than rational strategic planning. Tell Pepper I appreciate her concern, Tony replied, approaching the Mark III with determination that went beyond trauma or strategy. But this isn't trauma. This is purpose. This is what I was trained for. This is why Din spent 15 years teaching me that genius without discipline is waste, power without honor is tyranny, and armor without conviction is just metal. I'm not spiraling, Jarvis. I'm finally becoming what I was always meant to be. And what is that, sir? Iron Man, Tony declared, beginning the pre-deployment checklist with precision that would have made Din proud. The Mandalorian who protects Earth. The genius who uses technology for defense instead of destruction. The warrior who wears his code as clearly as his armor. That's who I am now. That's who I choose to be. Very well, sir, Jarvis replied. Initiating Mark III deployment sequence. All systems green. Armor ready for combat operations. Then let's see if 15 years of training were worth it, Tony said, stepping into the armor's embrace, feeling it close around him with mechanical precision that represented his entire adult life's work. The HUD activated, systems came online, the arc reactor pulsed with steady power that would keep him alive and dangerous. Jarvis, plot course to Gulmira. Stealth approach, minimal civilian exposure. Target only confirmed, 10 rings positions with Stark weapons. This is surgical strike, not rampage. We protect, we don't destroy indiscriminately. Understand? Understood, sir. Course plotted. May I observe that this approach represents significant maturity compared to your typical impulsive behavior? That's what happens when you're raised by Mandalorian, Tony replied, the armor's systems responding to his thoughts through neural interface that married biology and technology. You learn that discipline isn't restraint, it's focus. You don't act less. You act more effectively. Now let's go show some terrorists what happens when you use Stark weapons against innocents. They're about to learn that Iron Man doesn't build weapons for them. He is the weapon against them. The workshop, ceiling opened, revealing night sky over Malibu. The Mark III's repulsors activated, not the crude systems from Mark I, but refined technology that had been tested, perfected, and proven. And Tony Stark launched into the air as Iron Man for the first time, silver and blue and red armor cutting through darkness like avenging angel. Or more accurately, like Mandalorian warrior fulfilling his code. Gulmira, Afghanistan. 3 hours later, the 10 Rings fighters didn't know what hit them. One moment, they were terrorizing a village with Stark weapons, Jericho missiles, arc reactors powering energy weapons, technology that should never have reached their hands. The next moment, something descended from the sky, like meteor rendered in metal, and their world became fire and repulsor blasts, and a warrior who moved with precision that suggested training beyond what technology alone could provide. Target identified, Jarvis reported through Tony's HUD. 12 hostiles with Stark weapons, 27 civilians in immediate danger. Recommended engagement. Neutralize hostiles while minimizing civilian casualties. Way ahead of you, Tony replied, his Mandalorian combat training guiding every movement as he engaged. Not the wild fighting of movies, but disciplined technique. Identify target, neutralize efficiently, move to next threat, maintain awareness of surroundings, protect innocents first. A terrorist raised a Stark Industries plasma rifle. Technology that shouldn't exist in this timeline. Evidence of Stain's undertable dealings. And Tony's repulsor struck the weapon, destroying it before it could fire. Another terrorist tried to use civilians as shields, and Tony's targeting system, enhanced by 15 years of learning to identify threats while protecting innocents, guided micro-missiles that eliminated the terrorist without touching the hostages. "You use our weapons against us," one terrorist shouted in accented English, firing a Jericho micro-missile at Tony. "We learned from the best. Your company taught us to kill." "My company made a mistake," Tony replied, catching the missile mid-flight with magnetic containment and redirecting it toward empty building the terrorists had been using as armory. "I'm correcting it. And you're guilty of using technology meant for defense to prey on innocents. That violates everything Stark Industries should represent. Time to answer for those crimes." The explosion of the armory lit up the night, and Tony moved through the chaos with efficiency that would have made Din proud. 12 hostiles neutralized in under 3 minutes. 0 civilian casualties. Stark weapons secured for destruction. Village protected from further 10 Rings operations. "Jarvis, scan for additional threats," Tony commanded, his armor's sensors sweeping the area. "Any more 10 Rings positions in range?" "Negative, sir. The nearest confirmed position is 200 kilometers north. However, I'm detecting unusual energy. Signature 50 meters to your east. Not matching any known weapon systems." Tony turned toward the signature, his Mandalorian training immediately categorizing it as potential threat requiring investigation. What he found surprised even his genius mind, prepared for impossibility. A man stood in the village square, not terrorist, not civilian, but something else entirely. He wore an eye patch, a long coat, and carried himself with military bearing that suggested authority. Behind him, several figures in tactical gear watched Tony with expressions mixing interest and wariness. "Tony Stark," the man said, with American accent that placed him as former military. "Or should I call you Iron Man? That's what the news is calling you after your little stunt in Malibu." "Who are you?" Tony asked, his armor's weapon systems tracking every person present as potential threats. "And how did you know I'd be here?" "Nick Fury," the man replied. "Director of S.H.I.E.L.D., Strategic Homeland Intervention, Enforcement and Logistics Division. We're the organization that handles threats conventional military can't address, and we've been tracking you since Afghanistan. Impressive armor, by the way. Technology decades beyond anything else on Earth. Where'd you learn to build it?" "That's classified," Tony replied, his Mandalorian training warning him that these people represented potential threat to his independence. "What do you want, Director Fury?" "I want to talk," Fury said simply. "About your armor, about your goals, about why a billionaire genius is playing vigilante in Afghanistan instead of running his company. And most importantly, about an initiative we're developing. Something that could use someone with your skills, your technology, and your apparent dedication to protecting people." "Not interested," Tony said immediately. "I don't work for governments. I follow my own code, not bureaucratic mandates. Thanks for the offer, but I operate independently." "Independently," Fury repeated with slight smile. "Like a Mandalorian?" That's what you said during the press conference. This is the way. Our intelligence division spent 3 days trying to figure out what that meant. Best guess? Some kind of warrior philosophy your mysterious guardian taught you. Care to elaborate? Not particularly, Tony replied. My training is private. My code is mine. And my operations are not subject to government oversight. I appreciate S.H.I.E.L.D.'s interest, but I'm not joining any initiative, accepting any contracts, or submitting to any authority. I protect people because it's right, not because someone orders me to. I'm not offering orders, Fury clarified. I'm offering partnership, resources, intelligence, coordination with heroes who share your goals. You want to protect people? Great. So do we. You want to operate by your code? Fine. We're not asking you to compromise. We're asking you to work with others who also believe in protecting the innocent. Others? Tony asked. His interest reluctantly piqued. What others? There are more people with enhanced abilities? More than you know, Fury replied, and more arriving every year. Enhanced individuals, alien technology, mystical artifacts. The world is changing, Stark, getting more dangerous. You can fight alone and make a difference in small areas, or you can work with others and make a difference globally. Your choice. But before you decide, he pulled out a tablet. Consider this. The tablet showed footage of various incidents. A man with a shield defeating Hydra soldiers, a woman with red energy manipulating reality, a green giant destroying military vehicles, a man with a bow making impossible shots. Heroes, Tony's genius mind recognized. People with abilities who were trying to protect others. The Avengers Initiative, Fury explained. A team of extraordinary individuals working together to face threats no single hero could handle. We're not asking you to give up your independence. We're asking you to have backup when facing things too big to handle alone. Because they're coming, Stark. Threats that'll make the 10 Rings look like children playing with toys. And when they arrive, the question is, do you want to face them alone, or as part of something bigger? Tony stared at the tablet, his Mandalorian training conflicting with his instinctive distrust of authority. Din had taught him to operate independently, to follow his code without compromise, to wear his armor with pride that announced his values. But Din had also taught him about clans, about the importance of allies who shared your values, about how even the most skilled warrior needed others when facing truly impossible odds. I'll consider it, Tony said finally, but I have conditions. I don't take orders. I don't compromise my code for politics, and I choose my own missions. You can provide intelligence, resources, and coordination, but you don't control me. Clear? Crystal, Fury replied, with satisfaction, suggesting he'd expected exactly this response. Welcome to the Avengers Initiative, Iron Man. Even if you're not officially joining yet, you're officially on our radar. And something tells me you and the others are going to get along better than you think. Warriors tend to recognize each other. Tony nodded inside his helmet, recognizing truth in Fury's words. He was warrior, raised by warrior, trained in warrior code, wearing armor that announced warrior identity. If these Avengers were similar, people who use their abilities to protect rather than dominate, then perhaps working with them wouldn't compromise his Mandalorian principles. Perhaps it would honor them. One more thing, Tony said as he prepared to depart. If I join this initiative, officially join, it's not as Tony Stark the billionaire or Iron Man the vigilante. It's as Mandalorian warrior who happens to wear high-tech armor. I follow the code Din Djarin taught me. Protect the weak, defend the clan, wear the armor with honor, never compromise the creed. Can your Avengers accept that? They'll have to, Fury replied, because something tells me when the real threats arrive, they're going to need someone who follows a code stronger than law, someone who protects because it's right, not because it's ordered, someone who wears their values as clearly as their armor. The Avengers need a Mandalorian, Stark, even if they don't know it yet. Tony lifted into the night sky. The Mark III's repulsors painting the darkness with blue light, his mind processing Fury's words and the implications of joining something larger than his independent operations. Din had prepared him to be warrior. Afghanistan had proven him worthy of armor. And now, the Avengers offered him something he hadn't expected. A clan of Earth's mightiest heroes who might understand what it meant to follow a code that prioritized protection over everything else. Jarvis, Tony said as he flew toward home. Open file on Avengers Initiative. I want full intelligence on everyone Fury mentioned. If I'm joining a clan, I want to know my potential clan mates. Opening file, sir. May I observe that this represents significant shift from your insistence on operating independently? Din taught me about clans, Tony replied. Taught me that even Mandalorians need allies when facing the truly impossible. These Avengers, if they're genuine heroes, if they follow codes similar to mine, if they protect rather than dominate, then working with them honors my training rather than compromising it. The real question is whether they can accept a warrior who follows Mandalorian creed instead of government orders. I suspect they'll adapt, sir, Jarvis replied, with digital equivalent of amusement. After all, you're rather difficult to refuse when you're wearing several $1 million of advanced armor and claiming divine warrior heritage. Not divine, Tony corrected. Just disciplined. There's a difference. Now get me home. I need to review this Avengers file and determine whether joining them honors the way or violates it. Either way, I decide based on code, not convenience. This is the way. This is the way, Jarvis echoed, though the AI didn't fully understand the phrase's significance, only that it represented commitment deeper than programming, code stronger than law, identity inseparable from armor. Tony Stark flew toward his future, not as billionaire genius playing hero, not as traumatized survivor seeking redemption, but as Mandalorian warrior who'd finally found his purpose. Protect the innocent, defend the clan, wear the armor with honor. This is the way. 6 months later, Avengers Tower. The conference room held Earth's mightiest heroes. Captain America, Steve Rogers, Thor Odinson, Bruce Banner, Natasha Romanoff, Clint Barton, and Tony Stark in full Iron Man armor, because Mandalorians, he'd explained, kept their helmets on during formal meetings. This is ridiculous, Steve said, though not unkindly. Tony, we're allies. You can take off the helmet. The helmet stays on, Tony replied, his vocoder carrying Mandalorian firmness. It's not about trust. It's about identity. I am Iron Man. The armor is who I am, not what I wear. Din taught me that. Respect it or leave. Thor laughed, his warrior spirit recognizing kindred philosophy. I understand, Man of Iron. In Asgard, warriors are known by their weapons and armor as much as their deeds. Your helmet announces, I am warrior, I follow code, I stand ready to defend. This is honorable practice. Exactly, Tony agreed. Which brings me to why I called this meeting. We're forming a team. Fine. We're Earth's defenders. Great. But we need a code. Principles that guide when we fight, how we fight, and what we protect. We can't just be powerful people punching bad guys. We need to be warriors with honor. This is the way. What way? Natasha asked, her spy training analyzing every word. The Mandalorian way, Tony explained. The creed I follow, and I propose we adapt it for the Avengers. Listen. He displayed holographic text. The Avengers Creed 1. Protect the innocent, even at cost to ourselves. 2. Defend each other as clan. Never abandon allies. 3. Wear our identities proudly. Hide nothing from those we protect. 4. Fight with honor. Victory through discipline, not brutality. 5. Use our power to defend, never to dominate. 6. This is the way. This is absurd, Steve protested. We're not ancient warriors. We're modern heroes. We don't need religious creeds. You're wrong, Tony replied. We absolutely need creed. Because without principles guiding our power, we become what we fight. We become tyrants with good intentions. The creed keeps us honest, keeps us heroes instead of weapons. Din taught me that, and I'm teaching you. I like it, Clint said unexpectedly. Soldier's code by another name. Rules of engagement that prioritize protecting people over defeating enemies. Makes sense? Aye, Thor agreed. Warriors require code. Without honor, we are merely destruction given form. I support the Man of Iron's proposal. Bruce nodded slowly. Having principles might help. The other guy. Give him purpose beyond smashing. Protection instead of rage. I'm in. Steve studied the holographic creed, seeing past his instinctive resistance to recognize wisdom in Tony's proposal. Fine. We adopt the creed. But Tony, if we're clan, if we're allies, if we're following this way of yours, eventually the helmet comes off. Not because we demand it, but because trust works both ways. Deal? Tony was silent for a long moment, then, deal. When I've proven myself worthy of this clan. When I trust that you understand what Mandalorian identity means. Then, and only then, the helmet comes off. Until that day, I am Iron Man. This is the way. This is the way, the Avengers echoed, not fully understanding, but willing to follow the warrior who'd brought them together. And in another dimension, Din Djarin felt the words resonate across reality and smiled beneath his own helmet. His foundling had become clan leader. The training was complete. This is the way. I am Iron Man. I am Mandalorian. This is the way.